I'd like to make two observations about the law of God. Observation 1, James chapter 2 verse 10, whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all. Observation 2, Ecclesiastes 12 verse 13, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. And so the two observations I make regarding God's law: one, the law is a unified whole. You break one, you have broken all. And what unifies the law is the silken thread that stitches them all together, and that thread is love. Keeping this in mind, listen to the wording of the fourth commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. The commandment seems to target the head of the home. Make sure that everyone under your authority, under your roof, respects God's fourth commandment. Of course, the law also applies to individuals. If the head of the home and individuals are to make sure that those under their supervision observe God's commandment, this must also apply to all the other 9 commandments. Encourage your home, encourage your friends, encourage your colleagues not only to keep the Sabbath, but to not kill, to not steal, to not commit adultery, to not covet, to not worship images, to not have multiple gods, because the law of God is a unified whole. So while we are to encourage our manservant, our maidservant, our son, our daughter to observe God's holy day, we are also to extend that exhortation to the other 9 commandments. In other words, God's people should be a people that promote obedience to his law, not as a means of salvation, but as an expression of a lifestyle. And so as you keep the Sabbath holy according to God's commandments and his fatherly requirement, remember, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates, as verily as the Bible calls upon us to promote Sabbath observance among those within our influence, it also requires us to promote obedience to all the other 9, which means, as I said earlier, we are to be a people who promote obedience to God's law, all 10, because they express the entire duty of man, what God requires of you and of me. As you keep the Sabbath holy, remember, my dear friend, God wants you and me to be keepers of his law and to be promoters of that law as an expression of a lifestyle based on love for God. God bless you and doubly bless your children as you keep the Sabbath holy.